Hello, everyone. My name is Brad Grew. Welcome to the next episode of the Start Small, Think Big podcast brought to you by Digital Meld. Today, we're going to be talking about mastering your data for effective automation and AI. Data is the foundation of everything for AI and automation, data analytics. And I'm going to join by my co-hosts, and I'll let them introduce themselves.
Yeah, Robert Grew, CTO at Digital Meld. I think this topic here is a good one for us to discuss. It's a topic we often discuss with clients, so really looking forward to this discussion, guys.
I'm Carrie Hunley, Chief Growth Officer. My mission is helping businesses turn messy data into streamlined growth through AI and automation. So that's what we're excited to dive in today, and how mastering your data unlocks the power of great tools that we'll be discussing.
As Carrie just said, data is the foundation of everything that we do, and it should be the foundation of everything you do. I like to say what makes Microsoft, Google, and Amazon isn't so much their products and services. It's all the data that they gain and the insights they gain from those products and services. We hope that most small organizations and mid-markets and small enterprises can compete with the big guys by capturing all their data and gaining insights from that, predictive analytics, data and analytics, utilizing AI, utilizing automation, and really evens the playing field. And that's the beauty, is the tools are very approachable now. And you can start really small with something like Power Automate or Make.com or any of those other automation tool sets to even, start automating your inbox or something like that example. Before we dive into today's topic, we're going to touch base on some news and trends and just some overall discussions of AI in general. And then we'll dive into the meat and potatoes of the topic. I'd like to talk about just the foundations of AI and what AI is really important. I think in the news, we've heard, AGI is coming, right? We're going to have these assistants that know everything about our lives and do everything for us. And there's agentic AI that actually goes and practically does things rather than an LLM or a large language model that's just giving you responses based upon your prompts. All those things are great, and all those things are coming. But at the same time, to have mass adoption at the global scale, we're not really ready for that yet. And that's because AI is a three-pronged problem. For those that don't know, AI is the software, so the large language models and or the vision learning model or whatever models you're utilizing to perform the automated and AI tasks that you're trying to do. Then it's a hardware problem, which includes data centers. But at the end of the day, it's mostly the chipsets, right? The NVIDIA. It's why NVIDIA's stock has blown up in recent years. And then there's the power consumption. And so as you need to build data centers, you need to build power plants. And for those that don't know, to stand up a new nuclear power plant is about a 10-year problem. And we're several decades away from truly renewable energy. This is a problem that the government is trying to solve, as well as large businesses. And so for those that don't know, Microsoft has recently stood up one of the 3 Mile Island reactors that was closed down in 2019 because they don't have enough power for their new data centers to operate all this AI. So while, yes, AI is at the forefront and it's doing amazing things, for to be mass adoption across the entire business sector is nearly impossible right now because we don't have the capacity for it. Just as an example, whenever we go to Microsoft Azure and we request, online chipsets, the NVIDIA GPUs, it's a 2 or 3 week process to get approval for those because there's just so much demand. That's not saying you can't run things locally on your MacBook Airs or your MacBook Pros and then do things locally, but at the same time, to do things in the cloud, there's just not enough compute right now. So that's just something to keep in mind. And there's the supply chain issue, right? We all remember COVID. And with COVID, we had the supply chain issues just getting parts in general. And that's where, for the semiconductors, that's really the Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company, or TSMC. They're basically the only supplier of all the chipsets in your phones and all the chipsets in the NVIDIA GPUs. They have a new chipset manufacturing facility being stood up in the United States. But for now, all chips are really manufactured overseas. And so whenever you have global geopolitics at play with China and the South China Sea, there's just a whole lot of things that can go wrong with that. So just something to keep in mind is, I don't think a lot of people know that, we have the code and the power. So you have the Silicon Valley geniuses and the Harvard graduates, the MIT graduates building all these great tool sets. But at the end of the day, that you still need just the rudimentary power and data centers.
Yeah, and I think the good thing about the power problem is that's definitely becoming mainstream. You'll hear a lot of people talking on podcasts about it now. So I think that's huge. Nuclear energy, me personally, I think is probably the solution to that. But there's, all the politics involved that have to be overcome, basically. So that's at least good for the overall market. I think the first time I heard about the power problem, ChatGPT, for me, I started using it daily, probably January 2024. One of my coworkers at a previous job was bringing up the fact that, hey, look, we don't even have the power to run all this stuff. And I never really thought about it. And it's funny, even as a guy that's managed data centers and infrastructure, you wouldn't realize how much power is involved in that. So it's good that that's becoming mainstream.
Absolutely. The only thing I would add there is I think the cusp of every major innovation, right? There's always problems that need to be solved, and they get solved because of the urgency and because of the upside. So I have no doubt that while we need to work through these things, this AI is not going away. So it's only a matter of time before it's figured out.
Definitely, nuclear is the bridge. I like to say the bridge to renewables in 20 or 30 years. Geothermal is probably our best bet at a truly renewable energy. And like Carrie said, the beauty is AI is helping to solve all of these really complex global issues. So they're learning how to stand up nuclear reactors faster. Bill Gates is doing these micro reactors. There's a lot of stuff in the energy space that's being accelerated because of AI. So that's the beauty is, and that's just in general, that's all businesses are going to be improved because you're utilizing AI, and it rapidly iterates the cycle that you would normally go through from a process improvement perspective. And so it's just something that I thought was worth bringing up. And the beauty is the US government did get behind this with the Chips and Science Act of 2022 to build those US semiconductor production plants. Like Apple's building a new major plant here in Houston, Texas. There's just a lot of more innovation that they're bringing back because at the end of the day, this really is a new Cold War. And I don't want to sound hyperbolic, but it's China versus basically the US and NATO countries. Unfortunately, NATO countries really aren't holding up their end of the bargain when it comes to energy. Because like just look at the war in Ukraine and the things that have happened with the nuclear reactors from that perspective that were shut down and or the loss of gas power. And so this is a long-term problem that's going to take decades to solve. But the beauty is AI is going to help us do that really, really well. And again, it is going to be one of these things that we're just trying to stay ahead of the curve. And so you have to start that journey now. Carrie eloquently said it last episode that basically you have to start the journey now or you're going to be left so much farther behind. And so that's what we're hopefully you get out of this and get out of everything. It's again, you can make really great improvements today with all of the constraints we currently have. You can still do those sorts of things. So there's just a little bit of planning that needs to go on and some thoughtful use cases. And with that, I'm going to pass it to Carrie. And Carrie, do you have anything you want to share from the latest news and trends perspective?
Actually, I do, Brad. So I would love to talk about OpenAI's recent development. On March 12th, they dropped these new tools that let you build your own custom AI agents, no PhDs required. Very exciting stuff. Needless to say, social media lit up about this, and here's why it's huge. Whether you're a solo entrepreneur, a two-person startup, someone wanting to be the go-to AI champion at work, and like we talked about last episode, starting to be the agent for change, if you will, and this is your entry point. So imagine you've got a Google Sheet with client leads or a folder of invoices. You can create an agent to sort it, flag priorities, automate follow-ups, all tailored to your data your way. This is perfect for starting small. A freelancer could automate scheduling. A small retailer could track inventory dips, or if you're in a bigger company, you could use this to test AI on your data, building a case to get your team on board. The catch, it's only as good as your data, folks. Hopefully you're starting to see a theme here, but this is something that bears double clicking on, as I like to say. So if you clean up your data, you have a powerhouse. You have an engine that is ready to go, full torque. I'm not an engine person. You get the drift. But let's say it's messy and you're stuck with garbage in, garbage out. That's why mastering data is step one. It's the first foot that needs to be put down before the other foot can go in front of it. And these tools make it tangible from day one. So why does this matter for automation in AI? It's about growth at your pace. So for individuals or super small companies, it's a low-cost way to dip your toes into AI. Think automating a daily report or dreaming big towards a system that predicts your next move. For change agents, it's a proof of concept tool. Dip your toes, show your boss how this can possibly work, cutting busy work, reducing errors. Suddenly, you're the innovator in the room, and people are more open to hearing your ideas, even though they may not have been on their radar, or they may be a little bit afraid. If you can show them and talk to it from a personal standpoint, it changes the conversation. But here's the pivot. As you scale, you will eventually hit a wall where DIY isn't enough. If your data is spread across 10 systems, death by 1,000 SaaS products, as Robert says, or you need complex integrations, which integrations is a big thing that will be an additional theme you'll start to see emerging here, such as tying your agent to a CRM and a warehouse app. At some point, you are going to want to call in an expert. So we see this all the time. Starting small with tools like these builds confidence and gives exposure, but experts step in to unify silos, secure sensitive data, or optimize for big lead automation. As we say, you don't have to be an enterprise-sized company these days to have enterprise quality systems and solutions. It's not about replacing the DIY spirit. It's about knowing when your data is ready for the next level.
Yeah, and I think the key point, I also want to add to what Carrie was saying. This is huge for industry experts. I've seen the term domain experts. So these are people that understand, and I touched on this a little bit last week, but understand the business operations. They understand the problems at hand, where the people that are developing these AI tools, generally they're younger generation. They don't have all that experience, that the working real life experience that's invaluable. You can't teach that. It's only taught and learned on the job. Those people are now empowered. Like, it's leveled the playing field, I feel, for those people, because I see it all the time, pitches with startups, and they're trying to solve a problem that if you really ask the people boots on the ground, that problem really doesn't exist for them. They're just saying, hey, look, we can just do this in Excel doc, or hey, look, we pay an intern to do this for us, $3,000, $4,000 a month, and that's good enough for them. So I think that's another good point that's worth mentioning, to get all the data, to get that into a good spot. Now, if you're not a technology expert, then find one in your business, find somebody to work with, whether that's a consulting company and or just internal people, because I think every company has people that want to do things better, that want to make things better. So that's a key point I wanted to get across there.
Yeah, I think we've come to learn that we have a severe lack of integrators, right? And integrators are those, basically, we tell people all the time, like, we're business analysts as much as we are technologists. Like, we need to understand your business before we can deliver a solution for you. And as we go to these events, as we go to startup pitches, there's a real disconnect, as Robert was saying, between the recent college graduates and all these think tankers. Like, they don't see the day-to-day business operations, and you need to get those people in place that understand both a little bit of the technology, a little bit of the business. And in the future, it's going to cost you more and sometimes it already does, for a plumber than it will a lawyer, right? It's just going to happen. That's because you need someone who's a skilled tradesman who understands those sorts of things in a job that can't be automated. The same thing's going to happen with integrators. We're going to get to that in just a moment with the data integrations as well. But you need someone that can actually connect the two different silos and bring them together. And AI can help with that a little bit, give you some guidance. But at the end of the day, you need hands on keyboard. And most of the time, you need ears in a room listening to the people who telling you how they want to actually utilize that data. So I think from that perspective, we can kind of get on to the main discussion of the podcast today. And again, we're mastering your data for effective automation in AI. We've touched on a couple of points already through this episode, but data is the foundation, and we're just going to keep repeating that home because it's the most important thing you can learn from us. Is data is the foundation of everything you do. We work with construction engineering firms a lot, and whenever I tell them, it's like trying to build a bridge without the pylons, right? It's like trying to build a skyscraper without the foundation. We've got to make sure we've set that foundation first. And unfortunately, when you're trying to sell to business leaders for that instant ROI, if you take the time and do the foundation correctly, they're not going to see that ROI right away, but it's just going to make it where the cost is less prohibitive the more and more you build on top of it. A shaky foundation leads to shaky applications and shaky implementations, which leads to frustrated users and frustrated business leaders. And so our goal is always just kind of set that foundation. We tell people we're kind of like a cardiologist, right? You go to your cardiologist is not going to sit there and just say, hey, yeah, man, have that Big Mac 3 times a day. They're going to tell you what you need to hear. And I think a lot of times we say we have partners instead of customers for that very reason.
I'd argue that the data piece, while I love your analogies, Brad, and they definitely resonate with a lot of our verticals that are going to be listening, at this stage, the fact that AI and technology is so integral to everyday life, much less business, and it's not going away. I'd argue that it's like trying to write a white paper when you haven't yet learned the alphabet or how words are spelled, right? It's that, like you said, not to use hyperbole, it's really just something that's unavoidable at this point. And I had an interesting conversation a little earlier today. I had a working lunch and was talking to someone in the financial services, CPA realm. And from a fiduciary duty standpoint, at this stage, instead of, we went from kind of this gatekeeping of like, let's not have scope creep to pay for too many different tools and technologies, to if you're not looking at how to better utilize your data, which is an asset, 100%. We could do a whole episode on why that's the case, but also saving man hours, reducing errors, increasing competitive advantage. I would argue that your fiduciary duty at this stage in the game is to be looking at these things and figuring out how you can better leverage it for your company and yourself, personally, as a side note.
A simple example to show like how you can sanitize your data to get better results. I think many of us have listened. They've uploaded like a long PDF or a long Word document or something like that to ChatGPT. And then they've been able to chat with that document, right? And you can get some great responses. You can ask it to summarize it for you and Plus, it utilizes its historical data to give you those responses. Then we have hallucinations that also cause major issues with those responses, right? And so, in a way to solve this, researchers who live on white papers, who live on PDF, 100-page PDF documents, Google created Notebook LM. If you go to notebooklm.google.com, you can create these little black boxes of data, and it's only going to give you prompts and responses based on the exact data you've provided it. It's not going to take any outside sources from that. So if you want the true sanitation of what you're trying to share, you create these little black boxes. And there's no reason you can't do that in your actual organization. Let's say, you only want your HR department to have access to those HR documents. You only want the sales team to have access to the sales documents. But there are going to be times where you need to bridge the gap between those, where HR needs to know whenever a new project comes on and they need to know they need to hire more folks. So just keep in mind that there are things you can do now at a very small scale to sanitize your data and get better results. And again, Notebook LM from Google is free. And so I recommend everybody use that if you're just trying to look at PDFs. That's probably the best one to do it, because it's just a simple way that you can just access those PDFs. And I do this all the time. I'll go download a bunch of research papers about AI, and then they summarize these for me because I'm an idiot. I don't have a PhD. And so it works really well for me.
Spoiler alert, he's not an idiot, but
yeah. And so how we see this in the business perspective, most medium businesses and small businesses, even enterprises, they live in spreadsheets, they live in their inboxes, they live in these really disparate systems. And then they are siloed data by departments or by projects or by different parts of the company or sub-companies and partnerships. But there are tools that you can utilize now, like Microsoft 365 and utilizing like Power Automate, to get stuff out of those inboxes. And what we like to do, we'd like to tell people we'll meet them wherever they are. So example, if you have an engineer who likes working out of their inbox and you have an engineer that likes living out of Procore or ProjectWise, then it's okay. We'll just merge that data whenever they're done. Whenever they're done, they can work where they want to work, and we'll merge that data into a centralized data store.
Yeah, and I think this is where automation comes in. Everybody loves to talk about AI, but honestly, a lot of stuff that people ask us to do can just be done using like basic automation that people have been doing for years. I mean, how long has Power Automate been around, Brad? I know you've been using it
8 or 9 years at this point.
I mean, you can do a lot just with that tool alone. And I'm sure Google and there's plenty of other alternatives. Zapier, I know, is one that I've used in the past. We're obviously going to be talking mostly Microsoft products because that's our expertise. But again, don't get so caught up in the product. There are alternatives to basically everything right now, which is great. So keep that in mind. You don't have to just implement AI to implement AI. And if you have anybody pitching you AI, like that's the first question you should probably be asking yourself is like, does this need to get this complicated? Or could we just do a basic automation, like take Excel file from email here, put Excel file in Share Drive or SharePoint or Google Drive there?
And regarding AI, I keep hearing people saying, oh, I'll just wait till all the tools that I'm using add an AI component. That's great. That'll help a little bit inside of that tool. It's still not going to solve any of these other challenges. It still doesn't provide genuine insights from the merging of disparate data, right? There's a reason why inside of organizations you have executive offsites, you have town halls, you have quarterly all hands meetings, things like that. It's to get that interplay. Well, your data can and should be doing the same types of things now, commingling and bringing out new things that weren't available to you but are really powerful and useful. And I guarantee you, if you're not doing it, your competitor either already is or is starting down the path. And again, the pace that the world and especially technology is moving, I don't think folks are realizing how monumental, Herculean sized lift it's going to be to catch up if you allow your competitors to start gaining these efficiencies and these insights. And pick an adjective, it's going to be hard to overcome. And I'm a person that grew up around small business owners. That's really important to me. That's really great and exciting when they graduate to be larger businesses to the size of their heart's content. And I just don't want to see a lot of that blood, sweat, and tears being consolidated into larger companies because they just didn't move with the times, right? Like if you, back in the day when cars came out, if you decided to still use horses and it took 2 more weeks to get your goods there, like you probably went out of business. This is the same in a lot of ways.
Yeah. And I think a lot of folks may be listening and be like, well, my data is kind of all over the place. And like, that's okay. You're not alone. Enterprises, large Fortune 500 companies are some of the worst at this. They literally have data everywhere. And someone dies or retires and they're like, that system broke because we had no idea how it was written and those sorts of things. And the beauty is it doesn't matter where the data is coming from. As an example, I've used Power Automate to take data that came from a 1980s mainframe for the Texas Department of Transportation that they'd upload a CSV every night to an FTP site, and then have it to go to the FTP site and then come to a SharePoint list. And then eventually we graduated to Dataverse tables to present that data in a Power BI dashboard. So this is literally something from the 80s we were able to get to. Then there's Microsoft Power Automate Desktop. So let's say you have field workers, and Robert knows this world really well, so maybe he can speak to this. But where you can, if you have something that even works offline, you can have it automate the mouse clicks of going through this like 16-bit or 32-bit software built in the 90s to actually capture data that you would eventually get back to and through an ETL process, or extract, transform, load, or an ELT, extract, load, transform. Just know that's like you're just transferring data from one place to the other, and then utilizing that data in another perspective. Robert, can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, making it look pretty. I think like the theme here, ironically, the title of our podcast, like don't overthink it. Start small. Don't say, "Oh, I'm not ready for this. Our data's a mess." Like it doesn't have to be a huge task you automate. It could be the basic things. We talked about meetings last week, but seriously, like start with those small things. I've seen companies, especially oil and gas, they're very particular with one, change, and two, technology. And I've seen implementations of Microsoft Teams, whether it's automating like sending text messages to operators because they have project reports or daily reports that need to get filled out. Instead of having them sit down at a desk, log into their computer, which they probably log in, maybe 1 or 2 times a month, they get sent a text message to say, "Hey, how is your day going?" And prompt through the list of things that they would normally have filled out in a spreadsheet. So every row in a spreadsheet, they'd be prompted a question. They reply with the data that they want to enter in, and then an AI LLM kind of formats it in a way that is readable for the business analyst or the IT group that's doing all the reporting off those projects. So if companies like that can implement AI, and even that's just something so small that people do in every business. I don't know a business that doesn't have any type of reporting or Excel data entry. I would start there personally. And seriously, if you're out, especially if you're on an IT team internally, like talk to your end user. What are people's problems and how could you automate it? What is something, I mean, Brad, you say this all the time. Like, what is something you do every day that you wish you didn't have to? I think a lot of people have that problem. And that's what we are here, Digital Meld, but also you as a listener, that's what you're here too. Like you can do this stuff. It doesn't take PhD anymore to build these things. I think I wasn't going to bring this up, but I think it hits so hard. Like Andrew NG, I watched a TED talk with him a couple days ago, and it just kind of hit from home. It's like this is the time before people knew how to read. You only had select people in society that knew how to read, and now like that's been the tradition. You can't develop software or build cool products unless you knew how to code or you were a PhD and understood mathematics. And yes, that's still the case today, but it's making it a lot easier for that smaller guy to make a dent in a market or to do work for the small businesses or the medium to large enterprises. So I think that's one thing you should keep in mind. Like this has leveled the playing field, I think, for everybody.
And so as a way to maybe if you are on like an enterprise team or you want to make some changes in your organization itself, one place I would actually point you to is the CQRS, or Command Query Responsibility Segregation pattern in software design that Microsoft has. Don't worry, that'll be in the show notes. So just go to our LinkedIn page and you can actually grab those show notes and get a link direct to that. That's basically how we design all of our enterprise products. So you have these disparate systems. Either they're coming from an API, which could be as like a SOAP API, which is XML, which is terrible, or a modern API solution, or they could be coming from a CSV document or an Excel spreadsheet or SharePoint list or a database table or literally any system. I love the challenge of, hey, how am I going to get data out of this system or process? Please challenge us with that. Like seriously, give us a comment and say, hey, I've got this really crazy, and I just like solving those problems, and I love to see if I can figure that out. You can grow up from those Zapiers and the Microsoft Power Automates into like Azure Logic Apps or Azure Functions, or just using Python or PowerShell scripts or all these other sorts of great things that you can use. So, but again, like Robert said, start small. One of the first things I do whenever we go into an organization is I talk to the receptionist or the person working at the front door. I'm like, what's something you do every day that you wish you could automate away? Something that takes you 5 or 10 minutes a day. And we had a customer where she said, we have an executive conference room that they keep it stacked with snacks and goodies and drinks and all these other sorts of things. And they have the big comfy chairs and the best screen. And it was just a pain for her to like keep that room from being booked at the same time that there wasn't bookings for the executives themselves. And so we just wrote a Microsoft form with the Power Automate that simplified that process for her. And it made her life so much easier. And you know what? You impress the receptionist, everybody in the organization is going to hear about it. because that's someone who literally talks to everybody and sees everybody. And so that's where I like to start. I like to start with the people that I think it's going to impact their lives the best and the most. Solving those big, large problems is fantastic, but literally just solving the little ones that like just been nagging at you every single day for years, that's real key there.
I also really like to start with what's something that's typically goes smoothly and is not that complicated, but periodically there's an error and that error causes a big kerfuffle, right? Whether that be internally, whether that be apologizing to clients. Now you're on the hook for whatever cost from a scope change or liability or all the things. That's another place that I think can be really exciting to start. And that doesn't have to be something that's complicated, but man, the upside of not dealing with that from all the resources involved is another big way to get an immediate ROI.
Yeah, and I think there's a big misconception that you can't consolidate data within your organization unless you have thousands of dollars to spend on Snowflake or Databricks or Microsoft Fabric or these other massive ETL or ELT platforms. And that's just not the case. Again, if you're a Microsoft 365 customer, I know I keep bringing it up, but Dataverse is built on top of Microsoft Teams. And so you actually have free data storage, table storage in your Microsoft Teams today. And so you can do some great things. It's free 2 gigabytes for every single one of your environments. And so if you have multiple Dataverse environments, you have multiple 2 gigabytes for free. That's part of Teams. And you can build apps and services and all these other cool things. And so where we would say is start by just finding practical ways to consolidate your data. An example, like let's in project management, right? You have the people processing invoices, you have the people taking timesheets, you have the people actually doing the project management where they're scheduling or they're ordering logistics. Having all those in disparate systems, everybody's working in those own silos, you're going to have a lot of repeated work. So have those stakeholders come together and find out ways that they can share data back and forth and utilize the tools you have. If it's, most people start with Excel. Excel is really hard to grow and expand and really hard to do automations off of. Not impossible, but it's just not the best practice. And that's mainly because of like file lockouts and things like that. We won't dive into that, but utilize a SharePoint list. That's another thing that if you're a Microsoft 365 customer, is something really easy to do. A SharePoint list, you can have 10,000 items as a SharePoint list. Instead of an Excel spreadsheet, move that data to a SharePoint list, and then everybody can use the SharePoint API, which is really great to do some cool things.
Airtable is another example. I mean, there's tons of products that do that. So keep in mind, guys, like we'll continually say Microsoft 365, but there's tons of alternatives.
Yeah, and that brings up kind of the open source aspect. I'm a big proponent of open source, especially when it comes to AI. Like I think the Mistrals and the Llamas and the DeepSeeks of the world are pushing the envelope from the OpenAIs and the other big Perplexity and Claudes, like actually who are making more money off of that. I think I'm very much open source, and so I think there's a lot of open source alternatives out there. Like PostgreSQL is really great, and Supabase, which has like if you're not a developer and you don't understand SQL tables, Supabase is like a nice UI wrapper that's built on top of it, and you can host it internally on your own desktop. You can host it on the server. You can host it in the cloud for about $20 a month. Just a lot of things you can do. And again, we will talk about Microsoft most of the time because that's what we know. But just know that, especially in the AI space, open source is going to be really, really important. And the big thing too is like cost is a big factor for adoption within an organization. Hey, look at those open source tools, and we're happy to answer questions and give you guidance. So just reach out. Hey, I'm looking for an open source tool to help me with this. There are open source tools for like even automation. So there's a lot of good things to cover from that perspective too.
I think the beauty of this, like the future, what I envision, there's probably a lot of people listening to this, like, I don't even know what PostgreSQL is, or I don't know what Supabase is, or any of these other Dataverse. The beauty of this, and it's not here just yet, but you've kind of seen this with development and coding with Cursor and Windsurf. You can prompt in plain English and get a working example or demo or MVP of whatever you're trying to build. Like, take that and bring that into all other technologies. You can now query databases or query data, search your file server as an example by using plain English, but getting accurate results because that's what LLMs are really good at. So I think like the future of that is very exciting. We're not there just yet, but I think that's coming down the pipeline. That's this agentic AI that everybody's talking about. So very, very excited for that. That's going to help users that are listening to this that maybe aren't as technical get a grasp of all that.
Yeah, an example of, I have a systems and solutions architecture background at the enterprise scale. So think global rollouts for large scale applications that have 20, 30 systems integrating, like just insurance underwriting. I won't get into it because it's really, really boring, but there's just so many systems that they utilize, and they're accessing like Department of Transportation records that are stored in PDF, and they're accessing stuff in Excel and all these other sorts of things. And like in the back in the day, you needed to know about all these sort of systems to architect this massive solution to build a car insurance application. I helped architect the back end for a car insurance application for the largest car insurer in Canada, as an example. And I needed to know a lot. I had to have years of experience to know how to do that. You know how I architect applications now? I start with ChatGPT and or Microsoft Copilot and or GitHub Copilot's really good. I like GitHub Copilot as well. And I'm saying I'm trying to design an enterprise level architecture for that does this. And I literally just doesn't plain format. And then what I'll do is I'll copy out my prompts and then I'll paste those in OneNote and I'll learn better ways to do that sort of thing. And not only that, I'm documenting it. So if I have a teammate who wants to reproduce what I came up with, they have the prompts that help me get there. That's the big thing too, is like we're all learning this together. Like Andrew and G said, we're all toddlers who are learning to read for the first time because we're all flying by the seat of our pants. And each time they update these models, we're going to get different responses to how we prompted before. And the only way we do that is an open sharing of knowledge, which is one reason I think open source is going to be the king of all of this. I think you need to know more about the open source to know what they're doing. Just DeepSeek, as much as we don't like to talk about it, like it turned the world upside down. A lot of that was blown out of proportion and misinformation and things like that. But it is a revolutionary technology. They just spent a lot more developing it than they said they did. But it is a revolutionary technology. And I'm glad DeepSeek exists because that lights a fire under everyone else to step up their game. Competition breeds success. I truly believe that. And in this space, your competition's using these tools, and we hope you use them too.
I'd add that while we are, on one hand, in the beginning of a complete evolution, on the other hand, some of these concepts are not as foreign and scary and new as they feel. So when Brad or Robert say things like UI, which just means user interface, just the way that you interact with it, right? Because on the back end, it's ones and zeros and bits and bytes and all the stuff, which we can't engage with. Like first computer, they were like, we need a keyboard, right? Because that's how our brains work. But there's like things like, oh, a UI wrapper. Again, it's just a layer in between. But if you think about things like a remote control for a TV, I guarantee you the TV is not understanding like go to home, Netflix, channel 5. It's all bits and bytes and boops, right? So like that's a UI wrapper right there. We're all very comfortable. I don't think anyone is terrified of a remote control. If you are, you probably need to talk to someone about that. But the same with, let's say like I love Pinterest. I'm obsessed with Pinterest because it's so useful. On the back end, that's tables and data and bi-directional linking of things, right? Like Airtable changed me. Like I experienced Airtable so long ago, and it was the first aha moment of I didn't have to be a coder. I knew way less about technology and it interfaced with technology way less than now. And the ability to bi-directionally link things and filter things. So if I want to filter by this, it all shows up, but I can filter the same data a different way and it's still all there. It's kind of like a big thing of Legos. You can make a lot of different things out of it. So I just want to make sure and call out the fact that some of this is new and it's revolutionary and we haven't experienced it, but so much of these elements are more familiar. They're just so familiar that we take them for granted. And there will be a time in the not so distant future where much of what we're discussing today feels like that.
Yeah, and I think there's a big misconception that everybody in the technology space understands how everything works, and we don't. There's a lot of jack of all trades and masters of none. I would consider myself that. I know a good amount about a bunch of different things, and so that gives me a unique perspective. There are the people that are experts in one or two areas, but it's just too big. At the end of the day, just think of like a database or a table as just Excel on steroids. It's the same thing. You have columns and you have rows and you have data. And all you're trying to do is take data from your CRM and your ERP systems and all these other disparate systems and bring those into common tables where you can share that data across your entire organization for automation purposes, for AI, for data and analytics. Basically, just so everybody in the organization, they don't need to see how the sausage is made in each department. They just need to see the results of that sausage being made. And that's sharing that data across the systems. So the biggest thing we could say, communication is the most important aspect of all of this. Like you can't understand how the other people in your organization work if you don't have those meetings and say, hey, how do you work? What's something you wish you could do? So we go in as a partner and we say, hey, we ask those questions, but those questions should be happening before we even set foot. Because that's what makes a great organization, just like a great friendship or a great relationship. It's all about communication.
Yeah, I think the big thing people need to realize is this whole software SaaS model. I mean, nobody knows the future. It's going to look a lot different because, especially with AI, because there's stuff that can't get built unless it has your data. So for example, like t-shirt company has t-shirts going down a conveyor belt, or a chip factory has a chip going down a conveyor belt and wants to get rid of the bad the bad chips or the bad t-shirts with rips or discoloration. It can't do that unless there's thousands of hours of video of that happening, or pictures, thousands of pictures that are labeled so the LLM or the AI model knows that, hey, this is a bad chip. Because at the end of the day, like ChatGPT doesn't know math. It's been trained on the world's data, and it just correlates with, hey, anytime I've seen somebody say, what's 2 times 2, it equals 4. I mean, that's basically what ChatGPT is doing. It just has all this data and it's able to analyze it in ways that humans just can't comprehend. So for the average person, like picture a million rows of Excel data, these LLMs can analyze this stuff, 100x, 1000x, even more than we as humans can. So that's the other point we need to make here is, don't think just because you're some small business that your data doesn't matter. It does, and you may not use it today, but you're going to need it probably in the future. And that's what we've been telling people. We touched on it a little bit, like getting buy-in. The business politics of this is huge, especially as somebody that's managed IT groups and worked in enterprise environments and small enterprise environments. Explaining that to decision makers is tough. Like we have this problem all the time. And honestly, that's one of the main reasons why we wanted to start this podcast, because again, some people just aren't ready for this huge jump. And hopefully with this, like we can at least get you, like Brad likes to say, like hold your hand and run next to you while you're training for a marathon, I think is the analogy he uses. That's a big thing. Like make sure you get people bought in, address any fears early, because there's a lot of fears right now. I think Carrie mentioned it earlier. AI is going to take my job. And that's definitely true for some roles, but that's not true for everybody. I think if you're empowering yourself and staying on top of this, it's gonna be better for you as a whole. So
Yep, and I'm going to say AI is not going to take your job if you learn about AI. If you do your job plus utilize AI to make you better at your job, for the most part, you're going to have a job. And at the end of the day, you're going to learn more and you're going to excel what your previous job was. You're going to get promoted. My father always said, Brad, if someone asks you if you know how to do something, tell them yes, because back then in the mid 90s, he's like, you could go to the library, you could get a book, you could go to the bookstore and like pick out a book. Then that changed when the internet came, right? Then Wikipedia came around, and then YouTube came around. It's like, oh, how do you fix your washer and dryer? How do you fix your broken dishwasher? Like people do that now. And now with LLMs, you can literally learn whatever you want to learn. You have to be careful because it is trained on data. It is fallible. But then if you're correlating data across multiple sets, if you're checking Gemini plus ChatGPT plus Copilot, you're going to have that great return on your investment. This is approachable for literally everyone. And I started my automation journey with Power Automate. And literally it was, how do I get data from this Excel table to a SharePoint list? And I started there. And within 6 months, I was what they call a flow knot, or a MVP level subject matter expert for the Microsoft community. And it's because I didn't know anything better. It's like, I just went and solved other people's problems to learn. And so that's the thing too. If you want to learn more and you've reached your threshold for your position, go talk to other people, go talk to your teammates and say, hey, I was able to do this for myself. How can I help you? And how can I help you? There's a great TED talk about being the first person to take that step and to be that leader. But the biggest one is the second person who backs that person up and says, hey, we're building momentum now. Let's move on. I'll share that in the show notes. I'm not really eloquently saying it, but like, don't be afraid to take that leap. And then as soon as you do, other people are going to want to join you. So you may look silly for a couple of weeks, but once they see the results, they're going to hop on.
yeah, I think we haven't really talked about data governance or the security aspect of this. We briefly touched on, like, I think Carrie, or maybe it was Brad, like garbage in, garbage out. Brad was saying Notebook LM from Google. If you start giving it financial data and ask scientific questions, you're not going to get good answers, right? And that one seems pretty obvious, but the data governance of this, specifically like security, integrity, making sure the data that's getting put into your central location, call it data warehouse, data lake, whatever you want to call it, it's got to be usable and it's got to be accurate. And how do you build process? You're going to have to build processes to track that, build automations, whether it's through reporting or having people manually check 3 or 4 different places to verify the data. That's absolutely needed. So I think that's an important topic. It's something that's definitely just skipped over by most people trying to sell you AI products. Specifically me, from an IT background, I look at it from a cybersecurity perspective. How do I know that my end user, if I have a company chatbot, for example, how do I know my end users can't just say like, hey, how much does CEO make? Because, hey, there's probably a file somewhere on a shared drive or in somebody's email unknowingly getting pulled in by this LLM, and it could potentially feed that to an end user. So how do you approach that? How do you tackle that? I think that's something to really think about. We could probably sit here for 30 or 40 minutes talking about that alone, so I won't go into too much detail about it. That'll probably be for another episode, but that's another factor. If you haven't looked into data governance and how you can secure your data and make sure it's usable, definitely look into that, and we'll probably dive into that at a later date.
Yeah, that's really important from the business perspective. And so as you have those conversations with others and within your organization, get involved with that. But don't let that stop you from getting started with your own data
Yeah.
and your own processes. Again, just some basic data management visualization tools you can use: Excel, Airtable, Google Sheets, and then Power BI and Tableau from the dashboard side. And then just some automated solutions for data visualization. Data IQ, it's a paid solution, but they have a small team. I think it's 3 users that can use it and be self-hosted. Really a great product. And then Open Refine, something that can run, it's open source and runs on your desktop. There's Data Robot, Talend. There's all these other solutions that you can use to start just seeing what your data is. And Carrie mentioned it earlier, has mentioned it several times over, that like for a small business and medium-sized business, your data is probably actually more important to your growth than it is for an enterprise, because they have an abundance of data, and your data is really the crux of your business. Carrie, do you want to speak to that a little bit?
Yeah. Data being an asset, I can't stress that enough. How, as the famous, management professor Peter Drucker said, and I will continue to quote him, you cannot manage what you can't measure. That's one aspect, but you can't leverage what you don't know also, right? The real truth of it is that data is the new oil, the new gold. It's the next commodity, right? And that's why people want it so badly. People wouldn't be trying to get or glean your data like all these huge platforms like Facebook, Amazon, Google. Again, as Brad says, they're as big and successful as they are because they have so much data to work from. Knowledge is power. I think we have all heard that from the time we're young, and it's never been more true than today because the barrier to knowledge is very low. So there are a lot of people who are going to take advantage of that, whether that be as an individual or inside of an organization. And if you're not, again, I just can't stress enough how quickly and how far behind you're going to be left. And if you're discouraged now, imagine how you're going to feel at that point, right? Where you could have done something and you're seeing everyone else making huge strides.
Yeah, I think the big thing Carrie mentioned there, you're going to have to want to change either your company that you work for or the business that you run. You're going to have that mindset. The days of like, hey, I go to work and I do my 1 to 10 items and then come home. Like, I personally think that's going to change for a lot of people. Maybe not everybody, because not every business is the same. I know tons of people. Brad said we deal with construction companies all the time, and we interface with subcontractors who family run business, 5 to 10 employees, maybe 30 employees. They're still running their business on a notebook. Like, those businesses, they're going to be around. It's the people, we really speak to the people that want to make that next jump to whether it's implementing some type of invoicing process for those people, or automation, any type of automation really. So just keep that in mind. Like, a lot of this messaging is definitely directed towards the people with that mindset, and not everybody has that mindset, and that's okay.
Yeah, not everybody has that mindset, and that's okay. But generally, those are not the ones listening to a podcast like this. And so hopefully if you're listening to this podcast, you're all in for that knowledge transfer, for that continual learning process. And I think most people going forward, like Robert said, that's going to be key. So just, again, start small, think big, take those iterative approaches every single day. Just learn a little bit more every single day. Rome wasn't built in a day. Neither will your AI journey. Your AI journey for most organizations is going to be a couple of years. You can't steer a ship immediately. It takes some time. And so just know that. Don't get discouraged. That's the big thing too. And again, even if you're getting pushback, there's no reason you can't revolutionize the way you work personally, and then hopefully get a groundswell and get that momentum within your organization.
I was going to say, there's one last point that I'll make. Businesses, they need to treat data as a strategic asset. We've touched on this numerous times, but I think a lot of people think this is just like an IT problem that IT people need to solve. I've worked for a lot of organizations that have thought that way and worked with other organizations that have thought that way. And that is just not the case, because IT people, just like the business operations folks, have a day-to-day life that they have to do. They have to make sure servers are up, the file shares are accessible, users' accounts are getting created appropriately, stuff like that. They don't know all the business data that's important. Most don't. The good folks that I've seen in IT departments, they're able to merge those two together. They're able to understand the business somewhat, but also understand the technology. And so just keep that in mind. If you're listening to this and you're not a technology person, like seriously, you have an advantage over the technology people. So use that.
And my challenge to our listeners today is just in your day-to-day life, start thinking about how nutty it would be for you to ignore data in other areas of your life and then switch your mindset and shift that towards work, right? So imagine if you said, I have to write, a big report, but I'm not going to reference any of the data. I'm going to use my intuition. I'm going to use my gut, I'll go to the library and do all of my research. That way I'm not going to use the internet because don't fix what's not broken, right? Or if you went to your doctor and they said, well, we could do some blood tests and really figure out what's going on here. But instead I'm going to say, okay, your height is this, your weight's this, and your hair color's this should work. That would be ridiculous, right? And we're looking at the same type of thing. It's just because it's newer that people's mind hasn't wrapped around that yet. So my challenge today, and if you think of some really cool examples or you have an aha moment, please share that with us. We'd love to hear it. But just start thinking about that in the day-to-day of all the other ways that you're leveraging and accessing data for your betterment, and then start to think about how differently your work life and your personal life, but especially within organizations, how differently that could be and how wonderful.
Yeah, and building upon that, my challenge would be to think of things that in your work life and or personal life that you would wish you could automate away. And I bet you once you start looking at it, there's going to be some things you can do to improve upon that a little bit. You may have to lay the foundation to get to that point, but there are a lot of things you can do to automate. Just automating your inbox is a easy barrier of entry. Hey, if I get a email from this person, go to this folder. If you get an email from this person, send me a text message. Just again, start small, think big. That's our overall goal. Carrie, do you have any words you want to share with our audience regarding how they can get involved?
Absolutely. So you can listen to us on any of your favorite platforms. We've got audio everywhere. We have audio and video on YouTube and on Spotify. We're obviously on Apple and all the other good things. We're on LinkedIn, Digital Meld, MELD. Drop us a line, contact@digitalmeld.io.
Yeah, so just feel free to reach out. Again, I would love to hear some automation type challenges. So if there's some data somewhere that you would like to get that you have no idea how you're going to get it, maybe Robert and I can put our heads together and try to solve that for you. Again, we'd love to be challenged. So just a challenge to you to challenge us, and that would be great. Thank you again for joining us for this episode. We need your feedback. We want to form this in a direction that is what you want. This is a partnership, not just a one-way conversation. We want to hear what you say. We want to hear your feedback on what you want to change. Again, we're all learning. We're doing the best we can. We hope you join us on this journey. So thank you for joining us on the latest episode of Start Small, Think Big. Till next week. Bye.